Test. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base. Apologies for the delay in the start of our commentary with the technical issues here, but hope everyone is having a wonderful Thursday, and welcome to our coverage of the launch of Maxar's WorldView Legion 1 and 2 satellites, the first of a 6-satellite constellation for the company based in Southern California. As you see in the countdown clock, we are currently T-minus 15 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. SpaceX has been in propellant load and all is moving well with the countdown so far. Just to catch everyone up on where things are moving so far, let's go ahead and quickly step through the countdown, let you know what we've come through and what is still remaining. The countdown timeline for a Falcon 9 rocket begins at the T-minus 38 minute mark with the start of propellant load, that pole being taken. As is the case with the Falcon 9 this time, the go-ahead was given. Fueling began at the T-minus 35 minute mark with both RP-1 or rocket-grade kerosene being loaded on the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket, and liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes, cryogenic helium is loaded on board the tanks on the first stage, helps to pressurize them ahead of flight. The same process begins at the T-minus 26 minute mark on the second stage. T-minus 23 minutes, loading of the second stage kerosene tank wraps up. And then at T-minus 20 minutes 50 seconds, thereabouts, we see the so-called big vent from the strong back. It's the process that happens as the feed lines are chilled before second stage liquid oxygen load begins. T-minus 16 minute mark, which we passed just a couple minutes ago, is when they start loading second stage liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9 rocket. Moving right along, at the T-minus 7 minute mark is when the Falcon 9 engine chill down sequence begins. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pump, protecting the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage. The T-minus 6 minute mark is when first stage kerosene tank should be completely loaded. The 4.5 minute mark is when the strong back retract begins, slightly different in Vandenberg compared to here in Florida. Once the clamp arms underneath the transporter, underneath the payload fairings open up, the transporter erector or the strong back will recline about 13 degrees away from the vehicle, and it stays in that position until liftoff. 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is fully loaded. Fueling wraps up at the T-minus 2 minute mark when second stage liquid oxygen load concludes. In the final 60 seconds, the flight computer will begin its final checks. The launch director will verify their go for launch at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, we'll see the Falcon 9 lift off at a T0 point, coming up in 12 minutes and 17 seconds. And as fueling is underway, SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff at 11:36 a.m. Pacific, 2:36 p.m. Eastern, 18:36 UTC. T-minus 11 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. Let's go ahead and talk about the trajectory of this mission once it leaves the pad. SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket will be lifting off from the pad over at Space Launch Complex 4 East, or Slick 4E, at Vandenberg Space Force Base. Once it lifts off, it'll head in a largely westerly trajectory. And as you can tell by the red line there will be a boost back burn, and the first stage booster that's flying this mission will return for a landing over at Landing Zone 4. On board the Falcon 9 rocket today are a pair of satellites for Maxar. These are called the WorldView Legion number 1 and 2 satellites. As I mentioned, these will be the first 2 out of 6 planned for the company's new constellation, adding to its other Earth-observing assets on space. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Falcon 9 here. So we're now getting views from SpaceX. You can see the weather looking good out in Southern California, and hopefully for our friends in that region, you'll get a good view of launch coming up in less than 10 minutes. The first stage booster, it's a little hard to tell here, is fairly sooty, is because this booster is flying for a 20th time. This will be the 3rd time SpaceX has flown a booster for the 20th time. Taking a look at our live chat, want to, of course, thank the member community that we have here on YouTube. Thanks to folks like Stephen Fraser, Sandra Morin, That Opal Guy, Mark Otto, SG, and others. Thank you so much for your support through channel membership. Quick note from SpaceX. At the request of the customer, they are going to be wrapping up views of the Falcon 9 before payload deployment. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see those 2 Maxar satellites head off into orbit. It's a fairly quick timeline, though, for SpaceX. There will actually only be 1 burn prior to payload deployment. The first of these satellites is going to deploy at T plus 13 minutes and 5 seconds. The second at 16 minutes and 35 seconds. Also want to thank some of our moderators here in the live chat for supporting our live launch coverage this afternoon. So our thanks to AstroGen, and I think I saw Astro Joe here earlier. And thanks to Rusty Shackelford, who's helping us out over on Launchpad Live. Appreciate all of you, what you do here for the channel. And thanks to the nearly 8,000 of you who are watching live. You can help more folks find this live launch coverage just by clicking the like button and sharing the stream if you haven't already. Be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight Now. Turn on all notifications so you're alerted for future live coverage. Taking a look now at Landing Zone 4. This is where the booster will touch down about 8.5 minutes in launch. Currently T-minus 6 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. They're in the process of the engine chill down sequence, again, thermally conditioning the Falcon 9's first stage engines, protecting them from the risk of thermal shock and damage. We do have confirmation of Stage 1 RP1 load wrapping up. Good call out for a fueling milestone moving forward. Also want to thank Joseph Tracy for joining us with channel membership at the Mission Specialist level. Welcome aboard, Joseph. Glad to have you with us. Our thanks to Rick Donner and Stephen Fraser, two of our channel members. Rick gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships, and Stephen gifting 1. Really appreciate that generosity. And be sure to thank them in the live chat if you're our newest channel members. You're seeing a produced video now here from Maxar taking a look at some of the information about the 2 WorldView Legion satellites that are on board. Now coming into the final 5 minutes of the count, in about 30 seconds or so in real time, the strong back retract sequence will begin. All continues to move well with this Falcon flight. We're just going ahead and moving our countdown clock. Again, what you'll be seeing here, the strong back retract sequence beginning right about now. And again, we do have confirmation that the Western Range is ready to support today. And as you can see from these live pictures, the weather is simply stunning there in Southern California and presents currently no issues for launch. You can see the movement of the transporter erector there. It'll pull away about 13 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and again stay in that position until liftoff. It'll pull back in much more rapid fashion, though, after liftoff to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. This particular first stage booster, again, it has flown 19 times, going for its 20th flight today. Among the history of this booster include both the launch of the Crew 1 and Crew 2 missions from here in Florida, the first 2 full crew rotation missions for SpaceX and its Dragon spacecraft. This booster also supported the Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS-23 mission, as well as 2 rideshare missions, Transporter 4 and Transporter 5, both back in the spring of 2022. Do have call out for Stage 1 LOX load is now finished. Second stage LOX load coming up in less than a minute. Taking a look back at the live chat real quick, want to thank a few more folks for their support this afternoon. Welcome to Patty Komai, joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Patty. Glad to have you with us. Losos with a $5 super chat. Really appreciate your support, saying thanks for the great coverage. Channel member SG with $5. And hiya, Corgi. Hiya to you, SG. Good to see you this afternoon. Bill Sugden with a £10 super chat, contributing to, as he says, the usual coffee and cookie fund top-up. Certainly appreciate that. Coming up on the final 2 minutes before liftoff, and a big thank you to one of our channel members, Artemis, with a very generous $100 super chat. Thank you so much, Artemis. It's wonderful to see you when we really appreciate the generosity at that level. It is quite extraordinary and does not go unnoticed. Thank you. And Artemis says, "Go Science, happy to support." We hear the call out for Stage 2 lock load complete. The Falcon 9 is fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant. That venting you're seeing are the ground gas closeouts, one of the last steps before liftoff. The vehicle is now on internal power. We're about 5 seconds or so away from the SpaceX launch director giving their go for liftoff. And with that call out for go to launch, Falcon 9 is preparing for a liftoff in just a little over 30 seconds. This is set to be the first of 2 Falcon flights we're covering today, with the Starlink 6-55 mission coming up tonight from here in Florida. 25 seconds to go. Let's listen into the final count from SpaceX and the flight team there in Southern California. Apologies, folks, just realizing that we're countering another technical difficulty with the sound here, working on it.
It's confirmation that the first stage has ended its boost back burn. Really great views on your screen right now, too. We are just about T plus 3.5 minutes into today's mission, and just about 3 minutes from now, you should see on your screen the first stage's entry burn begin. Now, to start the entry burn, we will relight 3 of the M1D engines, starting with the center engine, known as E9, followed shortly after by the E1 and E5 engines. This is similar to pumping the brakes to slow down, and the vehicle will pass back.
Nominal trajectories.
Confirmation there, we're on a nominal trajectory. Now, we need to slow down to reduce re-entry forces, which then helps us to recover and reuse the first stage. During the entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines, but we're still moving really fast. This causes the vehicle to fly through Merlin's exhaust gases, also known as the rocket's plume, which deposits a layer of soot on the vehicle surface. That soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 uses, and with each flight, the soot builds up a little more on the outside of the rocket. Oftentimes, prior to launch, you can see the soot from prior flights on the first stage. Continuing to get really beautiful views from up in space. And of course, you can continue to track both the Stage 1 and Stage 2 telemetry in the bottom corners of your screen. On the left-hand side of the screen, you've got views of our grid fins with the Earth in the background. And on the right-hand side, you see our MVAC engine burning on board the second stage. On board the second stage are Maxar's first of 2 WorldView Legion satellites. Those satellites will replenish a portion of Maxar's existing constellation to expand capacity. Again, in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you can track that Stage 1 telemetry as it continues to decrease its altitude on its way back to Earth. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you can watch Stage 2's ascent to orbit. The grid fins that you can see on your screen right now are the primary mechanical mechanism by which we steer the first stage on its re-entry. We're expecting entry burn to begin in just about 15 seconds.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
There's confirmation of entry burn startup. Great view of that on your screen as well. Reusability is key to lowering the cost of spaceflight, which enables more investments in critical scientific research.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
With confirmation of entry burn shutdown, the Falcon 9 first stage supporting today's mission has now performed that entry burn 20 times. The Merlins on the first stage are optimized for sea level. These achieve 190,000 pounds of thrust each during ascent and descent. At liftoff, Falcon 9's first stage, there's confirmation that both the first and second stage are still on nominal trajectories.
Stage 1 transonic.
Confirmation there that Stage 1 is transonic.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 FDS has safed.
Right now, we're standing by for landing of Falcon back on landing zone 4 at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California.
Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Confirmation there of the 20th launch and landing for this first stage. This is the third booster to complete 20 flights. And this landing marks SpaceX's 302nd recovery of an orbital class rocket, including Meanwhile, up in space, we're continuing to get beautiful views from our second stage. Again, today's 2 WorldView Legion satellites will replace a portion of Maxar's existing constellation, joining over 95 Maxar-built satellites already in orbit. Maxar combines frequent monitoring over key areas of change with scalable analytics to deliver near real-time information to their customers. The WorldView Legion satellites on board Stage 2 today are the beginning of a new generation of satellite made to image the Earth more frequently and at higher resolution than ever before. WorldView Legion will support multiple kinds of data collection, allowing one platform to support both monitoring and mapping missions. Now we are standing by for confirmation of second engine cutoff 1, expected in just about 10 seconds.
MVAC shutdown.
There's confirmation of MVAC shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And confirmation of good orbit insertion. While we are just a few minutes away from payload deployment, it's going to happen between ground station coverage. So confirmation will come on X when we regain coverage later on in the mission. All of us here at SpaceX want to thank our customer Maxar for entrusting us with today's launch. And of course, we'd also like to thank the Range and Federal Aviation Administration for supporting today's mission. This will conclude our webcast coverage of SpaceX's 44th launch of 2024 and 339th overall mission to date. If you're interested in even more launch coverage, be sure to check spacex.com/launches for the most up-to-date information. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.
And as you heard, because SpaceX is going to be in between satellite coverage, we're not going to be able to see the deployment of those 2 satellites, but we did get a nice view of them periodically, looking at them from the upper stage view. And with the successful liftoff and landing of that first stage booster, the upper stage well underway to deploying the Maxar WorldView Legion 1 and 2 satellites, we're going to go ahead and begin to wind down our live coverage. Again, apologies for some technical difficulties here on our end. We believe everything has been ironed out, and it should be smooth sailing for our live coverage of the Starlink 6-55 mission later on tonight. So we really appreciate your patience with us and look forward to a little bit of a less bumpy broadcast coming up this evening. Do want to thank some folks for their support before we go ahead and close things out by covering the mission stats. Our thanks to Jeff Reeser for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that, Jeff. And Jeff says, would like to say that Vandenberg is on the central coast of California, not part of Southern California. That's fair. It is a little bit closer to central than south. We'll make a note of that. And our thanks to Callistia Lee for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that generosity, Callistia. And to our newest channel members, be sure to thank her in the live chat if you haven't already. Hitting our mission stats here. This was the 20th flight of Falcon Booster 1061. This was SpaceX's 330th Falcon 9 launch to date. Or 329th rather. This was the 45th Falcon 9 launch of 2024. The 111th orbital launch in the last 365 days. This was SpaceX's 75th liftoff from Slick 4 East and the 143rd launch from that particular pad. 14th launch from Vandenberg in 2024. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 18th landing over at LZ4, landing zone 4. This is SpaceX's 68th land landing between California and Florida, and as you heard in the broadcast, the 302nd Falcon booster landing to date. Closing out with some industry stats, this was the 14th launch from California, the 47th from U.S. soil, 51st from a U.S. rocket company, including the 4 down in New Zealand with Rocket Lab, and the 82nd global launch. You can see the pie chart version of that here. And with that, again, thanks again for bearing with us with some challenges on our end. We look forward to seeing you back here for our live coverage of the Starlink 6-55 mission. Looking for a liftoff from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station no earlier than 9:49 p.m. Eastern. Window runs until 1:17 a.m. Eastern. Certainly hope we're on the earlier end of that, but regardless of whenever they do launch, we'll be here with you to support the coverage of the mission. With that, I want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, the whole team here at Spaceflight Now, our moderators in the live chat, Astro Jen, Rusty Shackelford, and to our other regulars, Astro Joe and Stephanie B. Appreciate all of you and what you do for us here at Spaceflight Now. Most importantly, want to thank you here for joining us for our live launch coverage and your support of these missions. Again, it's a double launch day for SpaceX, having already been busy this morning undocking and redocking the Crew Dragon Endeavour, moving it from the forward to the Zenith or space-facing port on the ISS Harmony module in preparation for the arrival of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft, which is set to lift off from Space Launch Complex 41 coming up Monday night. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be good to yourselves, be good to others. Hope you have a good afternoon, and we'll see you real soon in a few hours for the Starlink 6-55 mission. But until then, bye-bye.